strict sense, of course, we invent nothing, merely bearing witness to what each morning brings again to light. Gold crossings, cornices, astonishment of pains, the turbine vent which natural law spins on the grill end of the diner's roof, then grass and grapples, or at the end of town, when sheen swept pasture land, the horse's neck, clothed with its usual thunder, and the stones, beginning now to tug in their shadows and track the air with fury. All these things are there before us, there before we look or fail to look, there to be seen or not by us, as by the bee's 12,000 eyes, according to our means and purposes. Every good morning begins with a little Richard Wilbur, one of the patron saints of the Westover English department. A poet 3/4 of you will recognize and 1/4 of you are studying right now in English too. Despite the general state of bee-like busyness in which we live, with our minds and hearts and hands abuzz in 12,000 ways according to our various means and purposes, all this activity, Wilbur believes, runs the risk of becoming a grand distraction from a far more basic truth. We invent nothing, the poet assures us. We merely bear witness, or more often than not, fail to bear witness to that which is, according to our capacity for attention, wonder, and astonishment. We spend our short lives as busy bees, and instead what we need is merely to be. Put to us like this in the seductive language of pastoral poetry and read in the quaint, reverb-drenched sanctity of a wood and stone chapel in an out-of-the-way New England town on a gorgeous autumn morning, it all sounds so simple. But in point of fact, this sort of attention is exceedingly difficult to summon, let alone to integrate into our daily lives. Why should this be so? What stands between us and a mindful, heedful, heartful being in the world around us? I'll put the problem as succinctly as I can. Here it is. This is the problem. Life is, for most of us, most of the time, pretty boring. It's often said that this generation, our generation, I'll include myself, more millennials. I'm almost 40, but I'm still our generation, we have a collective sense of attention deficit, it's called a case of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. People sort of accuse me of this, right? And it's funny, we hardly ever utter the full name of this condition. More often we use the acronym ADHD, as if we can't even slow down for the time it takes to order 4 multisyllabic words back to back to back. But I submit, what if in fact the opposite is the case? What if instead we suffer from a condition the critic Susan Sontag once diagnosed herself with, that is attention surplus disorder? Never have so many voices been conspiring to capture our attention all at once, mostly because getting our attention means getting our dollars. And for the most part, we oblige. Nobody understands boredom as well as teenagers, except perhaps marketing agencies. We rely on it to sell you things you must have today or to lose interest in tomorrow so you can once again buy in and continue the cycle. If Taylor bores you, try Rihanna. If Rihanna bores you, try Radiohead. If Radiohead bores you, try this up-and-coming, folk singer-songwriter duo called The Party School. Here we have a new accordion player who shreds. And so on. Our problem isn't a deficit of attention. Our problem is that our attention is always being piqued. It's always in feverish demand. Our gaze, like a land bird who's flown too far out into rough seas, is never allowed to rest in any one place. Keep flying or risk drowning in a sea of boredom and self-absorption. We've never been more thoroughly entertained, and as a result, we have, quite frankly, never been so easily bored. I want to talk to you a bit more about boredom because, as contradictory as it sounds, I'm beginning to think that boredom is actually kind of interesting. think about boredom. It reveals us to ourselves, does it not? You can tell quite a bit about who you are, about what you value, about what you desire, what your life is truly aiming at, by what bores you. Boredom, it turns out, is a kind of existential litmus test. If, for example, other people bore you, or great literature bores you, what does that say about you? Should you be working? I don't know. Think about this. I worry about this. I'll quote another poet. Since I'm an English teacher, that's what we do. I'll quote another poet, John Berryman, as a counterpoint to Richard Wilbur. Here's Berryman. Some of you had this with me last year. Here's Berryman. Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. After all, the sky flashes, the great sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn. And moreover, my mother told me as a boy, repeatedly, ever to confess you're bored means you have no inner resources. I confess now that I have no inner resources because I am heavy bored. Peoples bore me, literature bores me, especially great literature. Henry bores, that's Barrington's alter ego, Henry. Henry bores me with his plights and gripes, as bad as Achilles, who loves people and valiant art, which bores him. Those are the opening lines of Berryman's Dream Song 14. You can track it down if you want to find out how things end for him. But unlike Berryman's deadpan, ironic narrator, most of us are not heavy bored. We're always only just a little bored. Just listless enough to keep moving, bee-like from blossom to blossom, but not yet bored enough to confront the hidden and hard-to-face deficiencies of self that boredom would otherwise reveal to us. The ubiquity of electronic distractions is one possible reason for this. Every time you start to feel the least bit understimulated, you can always bask in the comforting glow of the nearest available two-dimensional screen. But I don't want to go there. I wouldn't want to blame the computer people for this state of affairs. I'm not ready to give them that much credit. Sometimes you hear people saying things like, look at this world that Apple created, where people live like machines, or living creatures with bodies and souls. But I think it's the other way around. Steve Jobs did not create us. We created Steve Jobs. We moved to the suburbs and severed the ancient ties of family and community and craftsmanship and husbandry and wilderness and faith. We created a world of loneliness and anxiety that we rely on our devices to help us escape. Steve Jobs didn't make us lonely. He just turned the fact of our loneliness and attention surplus into a really effective business model. Technology, despite what you may have heard, is neither the solution nor the problem. Our responsive readings from Simone Weil, the French Jewish Catholic mystic, there's a lot of things, suggest that something else may be at work here. Something else. In early legend of the Holy Grail, King Arthur's knights are on a quest to discover the sacred chalice, a quasi-Christian, quasi-pagan artifact that supposedly satisfies all hunger. What is it we hunger for? Empathy, the story suggests. Someone to ask the question, what is it you are going through? We're all the paralyzed knight in the story, the knight through was paralyzed. What is it you're going through? Because everyone wants to feel as though someone sees him. Everyone needs a witness to his existence. Someone who is looking for the good in him. What we hunger for is empathy, the art of attending to the needs of the other as if they were every bit as real and solid and thorny and immediate as our own. Further, they suggest that there's a connection between mindful, empathetic attention and something as seemingly trivial as solving a math problem. Right? The title of that reading that was Reflections on the Right Use of School Systems. When a teacher asks you to pay attention, isn't it interesting how these metaphors of money keep creeping back into our talk about attention? Pay attention, attention deficit, attention surplus. Anyway, when a teacher asks you to pay attention in class, the object is already predetermined for you. Pay attention to this task, this thing on the board, this painting, this idea under consideration. Not to the clock, which some of you may be doing right now, or to your growling stomach, or to the links on your pants. We tell you what to pay attention to, and by doing so, your freedom is temporarily restricted. It's temporarily. There's another deeper freedom that comes from submitting to these mundane tasks. Mark Edmondson, an English professor at the University of Virginia, a scholar who I've long admired, Mark Edmondson puts it this way. This is kind of a longish quotation, but I'm just going to go for it because it's way better than anything I have to say. Here's Mark Edmondson. He said, "The freedom of an education is the capacity to become interested in things, so that with enough time and talent and attention, the word again, you may become absorbed in them." That's going to be a key word. By becoming absorbed in them, you will see and understand the world for the first time as a home, as a place where you belong, and not an alienating landscape where others tell you what to do. Attention that does not lead to absorption is a kind of living death sentence. But these days, we have fewer and fewer opportunities for absorption. Instead, we lock students into classrooms where all they must do is pay attention to the next problem, fill out the next chart, and then their career is just more of that, the computer age equivalent of picking cotton. They will require coffee and Pandora and other artificial stimulants to stay engaged. Their minds will wander, and they will come home at night, and they will have to turn their attention off and shut it down in front of the TV. They will be not absorbed, but mesmerized. When absorption isn't found, or no one teaches us how to achieve it, mesmerism will have to do. And ultimately, mesmerism is about wish fulfillment. It's about becoming the soldier, becoming the sports star, becoming the princess. But if instead you learn to act out of love for the world, then in return you will receive one of life's best gifts, simple absorption. Today, in our world of base consumer capitalism, opportunities for absorption are slim. How many Americans feel the need to flee the banalities of the office and vegetate for 6 hours in front of Scandal or some other blissfully mindless TV so that they can turn off their brains for once in a day? Millions of us, according to the Nielsen criteria. Pause here. I hasten to add that there are many virtues to mindless television. Scandal has its place. I don't mean to wholesale criticize these behavior patterns at all. I'm using that word need very seriously. We need to tune out because we've just spent all day tuning in, paying attention to a zillion pressing things, and we exhaust ourselves because our attention is rarely or never allowed to become transfigured into absorption or love. Money may again be at the root of matters. Think about the word amateur for a second. The root of it is ama, love. The amateur does something for the love of it. It's the professional who does it for pay. Without love, even the most useful and ostensibly entertaining professional career can, over years and decades, corrode the secret chambers of one's heart. Bay's point, and Edmondson's point too, here it is, I'm going to say it twice. This is the point. The higher does not stand without the lower. Okay? The higher does not stand without the lower. Your teachers ask you to pay attention because practicing attention is your best shot at empathetic absorption. And absorption is your best shot at happiness because despite everything you may have heard about happiness being found by discovering yourself or being true to yourself, happiness is, in all sincerity, losing yourself in something that you love, something that will, in all probability, benefit others. It is to be dissolved, in Catherine's words, into something complete and great, something larger than the narrow boundaries of your particular being. But first, you've got to pay attention to that math problem, to that Latin declension, to that chapter of Moby Dick. To washing the dishes. To working on your car, to being with others, to being with yourself. The list goes on, right? At your 5th or 10th or 20th class reunion, you may or may not remember what I was trying to tell you the other day in class about the whiteness of the whale being Melville's symbol for the inscrutability of God, a self-negating metaphor without any positive content, etc., etc. But today, this morning's chapel, you will have been initiated into a powerful secret. Here it is. A great deal of your real education here at Westover is simply a set of small daily, sober exercises in the dying art of attention. The heart does not stand without the Lord. Because it turns out, the real opposite of boredom isn't entertainment, it's empathy. It's becoming the kind of person who can do that rare and miraculous thing, to love another human being. I don't throw that word around lightly. These days, love is a horrible, Hallmark-painted, four-letter word that elicits thoughts of pink and red hearts, and Nicholas Sparks novels, and certain kinds of cheesy pop music sung by certain British bands with messy hair and white faces. Right? It's a tainted word. We hear that word love and we immediately equate it with romance of the cheesiest kind. But that isn't the only or perhaps even the most important kind of love. Right? It's the love of your neighbor. It's easy to love someone who you already love, right? It's easy. It's easy to love someone who loves you back. It's easy to love someone who you're chemically attracted to, or who feeds and clothes and houses you, or who plays some other important role of your life. That's easy. It's not easy to love your neighbor. And who is your neighbor? Is that pesky English teacher who keeps hacking up your lantern phone? Is it that girl who smacks her gum next to you in study hall? Alright, that's enough. Here's what we're going to end with a short exercise. I want you to pick someone. Anyone. Someone who bores you. Someone who frustrates you. That's right. Right, someone who frustrates you, I want you to pick. Someone who annoys the hell out of you. Let's be honest here. Being part of the community means that we all have someone who gets under our skin to a rational or irrational extent. And I want you to spend just 60 short seconds thinking of that person, and with your eyes closed, in the quiet of your own mind, ask him or her as many times as you're able and with as much sincerity as you can muster, what are you going through? What are you going through? Try to imagine, try to get creative, try to empathize. Ready? Set, go. What are we going through? Love requires the effort of mindful attention because the other person is always there. We don't know quite what we're looking at. And so we must remain open, in Day's words, to wait upon the truth of the other. To love is therefore both an ethical and a creative act. Not so much a set of emotions, but a way of seeing and attending and heeding and being. It requires you to ask not only once, but over and over again in every new situation, what are you going through? This work is the work of a lifetime. Fortunately, it is work that can become absorbing. It is work that is also rest. And when it comes naturally just